lives again. They couldn't hold down a job. They were just kind of weird after that.
You mean by damaged, you mean they were suffering some kind of psychosis?
Still suffering
long-term
intermittent,
effects?
still suffering intermittent like hallucinations and things like that.
So it wasn't just like a little post-traumatic stress disorder
could have been
stuff?
That could have had something to do with it too, or it could have been that they were just deadbeats who didn't want to actually have a job and they wanted to be on unemployment.
I guess that's
and it was convenient.
Yeah, maybe that's it. I don't know.
I don't know that unemployment was great in the 50s, but
yeah, no, probably not. I think that there are people out there who are psychologically a little less stable than all of us.
Yeah.
And have something like this happen to you, it could permanently. I can see where it could permanently damage you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I don't even know that you would have to be, less stable than normal, quote unquote. I think this is the sort of thing, particularly if
everybody has a breaking point.
Well, and if you were in really seeing kind of the most horrible stuff that was happening, people screaming about these things happening to them, or guys saying that they could fly and jumping, and things like that could probably permanently damage almost anyone.
Well, I could see it. It would leave you some pretty traumatic memories.
Yeah.
Well, and the other thing is that area has a pretty. It's a high. They're all fairly religious. It's mostly Catholics.
Yeah.
So there's a certain fire and brimstone aspect that you might
kind of
think,
apocalyptic.
Yeah. So you're like, oh, I've gone to hell, and if you're very devout, that would have some pretty traumatic effects on you.
That could, yeah. And of course, when you come back from hell, then hey.
Then what have I done? What do I got to do right? I can never do. I mean, like this is one of those snowball situations.
Or maybe you are still in hell and you just don't know it.
Yeah.
Maybe we're all in hell.
Possible.
That would explain something.
Yeah.
But, yeah. Eventually, of course, things did get back to normal and inquiries were made. And it turns out that everybody who'd been affected by this insanity had bought bread from a local baker whose name was Wolfman, and some people suspected him of intentionally poisoning his customers, although it doesn't look like he actually did do it on purpose.
Is this a squares or rectangle sort of situation where everyone who was sick had bought bread from him, but not everyone who bought bread from him was sick? Or was it like, no, literally everybody who got sick were the only people who bought bread from him?
Yeah.
Do you know?
I don't know, but
Okay.
I would suggest I don't think anybody goes and buys bread and doesn't eat at least some of it.
Well, I just mean, so if he's the only baker in town,
I don't know
right,
if he was
and
the
there's
only
5,000
baker.
people there, and all 5,000 have bought bread from him, but only 300 got sick,
Yeah.
versus
He was not
only
the only
those
baker.
300 people bought bread from him and ate it and got sick.
Devin is asking, is it all or some of his customers?
customers.
It only is some of his customers.
Okay.
Because, and we'll get into this more later on, but there were certain products that he made that may have been tainted, but not necessarily all of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just feel like that's an important thing to know.
Yeah. But yeah, none of the other bakers in town had sold bread to these people who were having problems.
Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't look like he did it on purpose, though. They traced his grain that he'd used back to a supplier in another town. I can't remember. I came across it, and I should have written it down. Now I can't find it again, and I hate that.
Because the internet has moved the link on your computer to somewhere else.
The internet has shifted.
Yeah.
But they decided that they had sold Roquebrien a tainted batch of grain. And I'm assuming this is the old days. I mean, I don't know if they actually supplied him with flour or if they gave him grain and then he ground it up himself.
Well, that's a good question.
Yeah, I don't know.
In the 50s, probably the flour.
Now, it could be either way, as ingrained as it is now.
Yeah, and especially
That's true.
in some of these little old villages in the middle of, that I think are probably pretty old school.
I guess it's just my bias to assume when somebody says his supplier, I think.
You would think that
It was produced, but you're right.
It's a lot more efficient to grind it all in one place and make it into flour, and then send the flour out to the bakers.
Chicken Little
And
did
probably-
teach me that. It's true.
Yeah.
Right? It was Chicken Little?
Good old Chicken Little. I don't know.
The sky is falling?
Oh, no, it was the other chicken. The one that made the bread, did everything. Really?
I think you're hallucinating. I don't think any chicken ever made any bread, but I could be wrong.
I'm sorry, my chickens have never made bread.
Yeah. Well, anyway, long story short, it appears that our good old friend Ergot was the cause of the poisoning.
Officially.
Officially, as you know, if you've listened to past episodes, the only culprit that we blame more than Ergot is Choopy.
Yeah.
good old choopy.
It's
Poor
not
chupacabra.
lupus ever.
Yeah. But ergot, if you don't know it, is a fungus that grows on rye plants, which is, by the way, the reason I've stopped eating rye bread. I mean, I like rye. I really do.
I don't think ergot's something that like people get in modern days.
Probably not.
I think the kind of bread that you would be buying, kind of rye bread you would be buying, would be pretty heavily processed and probably fungus-free.
Oh, cool. Maybe I'll start eating it again.
You
then.
should.
I think the main thing is just not to let it get too old.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
obviously, don't let it get moldy.
Yeah, no. But there is...
Don't let any of your bread get moldy.
Pretty much, yeah. And the other thing to watch is peanuts. There's a mold that grows on peanuts that is really deadly. It'll destroy your liver. So, yeah.
Maybe that's why I feel like crap all the time.
Yeah, don't eat old nuts.
That or you work too much.
Anyway, the most believed theory so far is ergot poisoning, but of course there are others.
Of course.
Of course. But the first one is of course ergot. We're getting into our theories now. So did Roquebrien get a batch of flour that was tainted by ergot fungus? Seems possible.
There's a bunch of issues with this, though.
Well, there are. It's possible. I mean, there could have been a batch that was processed by a supplier, and we're going to, I guess, assume for the sake of assuming that it was sent to him as flour, bags of flour. So imagine that you got this whole huge batch of grain, and there's a tiny little bit of it that's infected with ergot. And so you grind it all up, you dump it in a bag, and just as luck has it, it all winds up in just one bag and not in a whole bunch of bags.
Well,
Or
okay.
maybe some of it got distributed to other bags, but in small enough quantities that it didn't really afflict too many people.
My 2 cents on that is, one, again, we're making the assumption that this is a large-scale supplier. It's possible that it's just a farm that only supplied him,
True.
right? Or, him and one other people. But we're
Yeah.
also assuming that it came to him with ergot in it. Is it not possible that he got the flour or maybe the grain and just let it sit for a little while? He over-ordered in bulk or something like that, and then it
That's actually
happened there?
what I was thinking, is actually it could have been, he could have caused it not intentionally, but just through slightly negligent behavior by letting it lay around.
Yeah.
I mean, we've all experienced, like when something gets pushed to the back of the fridge and you kind of forget about it, and then you discover it like long later, and oh wow, it's like scary looking.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think one of the things, right, is it's possible also, when you go to the store and they're like, meat on sale, it's super slashed, and you go, oh, that's a great deal, wut thinking, oh, it's probably on sale because they got to get rid of it because it's going to go bad. And
it always has the giant stickers on it so you can't see the ucky bits.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
love how they do that. That's so sneaky.
But I mean, it's possible, right, also that, he just got a batch that was a little older and he didn't realize it was older, and then he let it sit for a little too long and then just made some bread with it. And
that's, actually I really, I'm really leaning towards that myself, because I think that's probably what happened.
Can I ask a question? Because it's been so long since we've talked about ergot that I don't remember. Does cooking the bread not destroy the toxin?
Well, that's the part that I don't know. I was trying to do a little research on that, and I couldn't find out one way or the other. And I really honestly don't know.
Okay.
Because generally speaking, in cases of ergot poisoning, it's usually bread that's already been baked but been sitting around for too long.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's old bread. So that's why I'm asking this, because the grain having it doesn't seem to be as much of a culprit to me. If then he threw it into an oven and cooked it, he's cooked it off.
That should technically.
Unless it's in the grain, and then it jumps from the grain to the loaves of cooked bread that are sitting around that have cooled off and therefore are a perfect host again.
Oh, I see what you're saying. That's always possible too, I guess.
So to all our bakers, don't store your freshly baked bread on top of your flour supply.
Good idea. Yeah. Well, but you probably noticed that a lot of bread, what they do is after they've baked it, before it actually cools, they sprinkle powder,
They sprinkle some flour on. Yeah,
They
some
do.
breads.
Yeah, I mean, so that's a possibility, is that actually the ergot that was in it when it got baked was maybe killed off, but they sprinkled fresh stuff on top. But,
the other thing that I was seeing when I was reading about ergot and bread is that at least in modern times, they see the most instances of of ergot being developed in baked bread when it's put directly without being able to be cooled sufficiently, put directly into plastic bags because it holds the moisture in. So I wonder if it's possible that he was bagging his bread before it was, in plastic bags, and none of the other bakers in town were. They were letting it air dry.
I don't think
they were using plastic bags in those days.
But paper bag would be equivalent. I mean, a paper bag
would still hold in a lot of moisture.
Well, you go to the baker sometimes and you'll get that kind of waxy paper, butcher paper, and they'll. Sometimes I've been to places where they'll just wrap it in that and give it to you in that. It could be a situation like that.
It could be, yeah.
And that's because that traps the moisture from the heat. Yeah.
So that's an idea, too, that he was packaging his bread differently, which was causing it to mold.
Mm-hmm. Could be. All right, well, so that's it. I mean, the ergot theory is one of the prevalent theories out there. There's some other ones that are kind of interesting.
Well, but here's the one thing about the ergot that I have an issue with. Is that if indeed it came from the source that he gets his flour or his grain from, how is it he's the only one that got it?
Oh, I know.
You know what I mean?
That is the problem with that. I think that, again, my thoughts on it are that probably just to sheer luck. I mean, the fungus started growing in some grain.
In a small mass,
and it hadn't had time to really spread out a lot. It got ground up, and probably 95% of it wound up in one bag of flour that went to his place. If this is what's happening, I could see that happening.
Have you ever seen how flour is made? I mean, they grind that stuff up, and it gets stirred up. The chances of it, I guess what I'm getting at is the chances of it, that little mass of it staying together once it was ground into flour is pretty small.
Yeah, but again, we're assuming that it came to him as flour.
That's true.
And it came to him from a large enough supplier that they were supplying multiple places, which we don't know either of those things.
You're right.
So.
There's so many things we don't know.
I'm going to stop complaining about it then.
All right. Let's move on to another theory. It has been proposed that this might have been some sort of contamination or maybe even intentional poisoning of the water supply. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this one because it actually is, in terms of actual percentages, not that many people were really affected with the insanity. I think something like 6 or 7%. And it's hard to say because I don't have a totally clear number of exactly how many people were affected. And I also don't know precisely what the population of the town was in those days.
Well, I was going to say the other thing we don't know is where in the town the people who were affected lived. Were they clustered in one neighborhood or were they randomly spread about?
I'm assuming they were all fairly clustered around that one bakery. Yeah, probably reasonably close because I'm sure the village had more than one bakery, and you probably went to the one that was closest to you. Although this guy apparently had a reputation as the best baker in town.
Yeah.
So it might have been people coming from all over, and it's not really a huge town, so it's not that hard to bicycle over to his bakery and get a loaf of bread.
Because it was 10,000 people in 2012. Yeah, okay,
yeah.
5,000 people. Yeah, it's not that huge. Okay,
not really. I mean, I could see maybe he was the only baker, but I really, really doubt it.
I'd be surprised.
I would be surprised too. Yeah, but anyway, the contamination of the water supply, that would have affected a lot more people than what my estimation of 6 to 7% of the population were affected. So I think it would have affected everybody except for the town alcoholic who only drank wine.
Yeah.
I think we can rule that one out. What do you guys think?
I'm willing to let that one go.
I agree, yeah.
Under the bridge.
That one's fine.
Okay, all right. Another theory that's been proposed is mercury poisoning. This would apparently be caused by this product called Panagen, which was a cleansing agent that was used in wheat containers. I don't know if they're using it anymore, but apparently it's mercury-based.
Probably not using it anymore.
Yeah, probably not.
As soon as you said that, I'm it's probably nix that.
Probably not. And actually, mercury poisoning, the symptoms of it, I've looked it up, and they were actually very consistent with most of the medical symptoms that people experience.
It causes a lot of cramping
and chills and hypertension, and tachycardia and all kinds of stuff. And so sweating, a lot of sweating, excessive salivating, and stuff like that. These were all things that people were experiencing. But mercury poisoning does not include hallucinations and total craziness. So I don't know what to say. There's still people that are kind of putting this theory out there, but at least I have never, in my admittedly brief research into mercury poisoning, I've never seen anything about hallucinations or psychotic behavior or anything.
Yeah, no, that's not something that you hear about. So I would see why. Yeah, I'm not willing to be on board with mercury poisoning just because of that.
Okay. Damn, these theories are just too thin. Another theory is that Roquebrien, the baker, might have actually done something a little bit illicit, which caused this to happen.
So inadvertently?
Yeah, inadvertently, of course. But from all accounts, he took great pride in the whiteness of his bread. And apparently back in the day, I don't know if it's still the case now, but in those days, the French liked their bread as white as it could possibly be.
Yeah.
Yeah, seriously. I don't know. Have you been there lately? Do they still like it white?
No, I haven't been there in like 13 years. But when we were there, yeah, they liked it white. I have a friend who just went, and I mean, they like their crusty bread, though. I don't know.
I have no idea. They were yelling at me. I had no idea what they were saying. So I didn't even know what their bread was.
They were yelling like look how white my bread is. It's about the best.
And I'm like, why are they so angry?
They weren't angry. They were just bragging about their white bread.
They were just, just really proud.
Yeah. Well, so could it be that the baker used some chemicals to bleach his flour and accidentally sort of poisoned everybody? Well, this theory was put out by a guy named Stephen Kaplan, who published a book in 2008, and it's not devoted entirely. It's apparently like a 1,000-page book. I haven't read it, but I've read some reviews and summations of it and stuff, and it's about a lot more than just Pensant Esprit. It's a lot about that era in France, and but he had some stuff in there, and he argues in the book that somebody, perhaps a certain baker, used nitrogen trichloride to bleach his flour. And doesn't actually, other than that, as a theory, he doesn't really provide any evidence to speak of. There's no smoking gun, no discarded bottles of nitrogen trichloride or anything like that. But it was actually used commonly to bleach flour, but way back in the day. And apparently, according to Wikipedia, it was banned for that use in 1949, although the page contradicts 1947.
Was internationally banned in France?
That's a good question. I don't know.
Banned in the small southern county of France.
This is why we use Wikipedia for the very general overviews and then dig in.
And I tried to dig in and I couldn't find anything that
I'm guessing that they're citing multiple sources, and that's the problem, is that they're the location is what's making the discrepancy.
Yeah, you can't obviously you can't really ban anything worldwide. It just doesn't,
not easily.
Can't really be done. No. But it sounds like it has fallen from favor. Apparently, kind of dangerous, turns out. The problem that I have with this theory is that it was commonly used prior to when it was banned for bleaching flour. And so if this caused that kind of outbreak of insanity, then we would have had lots and lots of instances of this kind of mass outbreak of insanity prior to 1949 or wherever it was banned, right?
Unless he was over bleaching his flour.
Well, it might be that he wasn't actually doing it quite correctly, and maybe he used too much.
Right, that's why he had the whitest bread. Everyone else was like, "How's he getting his bread so white without killing people?"
He is killing people.
He just killed somebody.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but anyway, I'm not really liking this theory because I really do think that there would have been at least some instances of this happening in other places.
You would think that this would not be an isolated event.
Yeah. But so it's possible, but I don't think so. As for Roquebrien, he actually died broke and kind of an outcast. Apparently, a lot of people were suspicious of him, even though I think it appears that he was probably innocent of any wrongdoing. But unfortunately for him, obviously that's just not good for business. Food and they all get sick. Well, that's going to kill your business.
What's the burrito place that's having all the trouble?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
they're not really having trouble anymore, though.
Well, but there was a huge backlash, and for a while, because they had to come in and get your free burrito, because we're sorry we got you sick, and your free burrito got you sick.
Yeah.
Like, there's things that just people don't forgive. There's people who will never go back to that joint.
I'm one.
Yeah, I know, but the thing is, E. coli outbreaks like that, they take place all over the place.
Oh, I know.
It's like I'm sure these guys are being extra careful these days.
Oh yeah, no, they were completely. It wasn't. I don't think that was their fault. It's not like they were saying that their burritos got better diesel mileage than it actually did, and were lying to the public. That's a different company.
Yeah.
That's a good point. I don't know what company you're possibly talking about, but yeah. Well, so anyway, the
Far
theory,
from saying.
nitrogen trichloride, I think we can knock out as a theory.
I would say yes.
Yeah. Okay. That comes to yet another theory, which is it was the CIA.
Ugh.
Yeah. And there's theories out there about this MK Ultra. I'm sure you guys have heard of it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and LSD. And there was indeed an MK Ultra program that began in the 1950s, and it did exist in reality. It's not just a conspiracy theory. I mean, a lot of people have run with it, so it's like, not quite as incredibly, insanely conspiratorial as a lot of people make it out to be. But they did do some interesting stuff. Probably some of it a little bit unethical.
I was going to say, by interesting to you, mean oh God, I can't even think of the word where nobody was on board with it. They didn't know. They were unwilling participants. And
yeah, they unwittingly, people were unwittingly being poisoned or drugged up and things like that. So yeah, I guess that was a little shady. But there's a guy named Hank Albarelli, and you can see footage of interviews of him on the internet if you want to do a little Google on his name. Mm-hmm. And he published a book in 2009 claiming that the CIA, alternatively, I've heard that he claims that they used aerosol spraying of LSD over the village as an experiment, or he actually poisoned the bread coming out of this guy's bakery. And he did a lot of research. He claims to have found all sorts of secret documents that make reference to this. And he was doing a lot of research into the death of Frank Olson, who some of you might have heard about. I think he's somewhere on our list of unsolved mysteries that we haven't actually jumped on yet.
Yeah, the name doesn't ring a bell, but
yeah. He was a biochemist that worked with the Special Operations Division, or SOD. And he jumped out of the 13th floor of a hotel in New York City in 1953. And there's a theory out there that he was actually thrown out that window. Yeah, or maybe he just jumped. I don't know. Alberetti was looking into the death of Frank Olson when he came across some references to Saint-Esprit, and so he made that connection. Apparently, it is his belief that Frank Olson was working with SOD and that he was part of the operation that poisoned the people of the town. Was there actually an operation? Well, we'll talk about that. But apparently, his theory is that Frank Olson was murdered because he was actually become disillusioned and wanted to go public, or at least had been a little too loose-lipped about the whole thing. And he was seen as a security threat, so he was murdered. Yeah.
Well, the thing that people cite to back this up a lot is that this company called Sandoz.
Yeah, in Switzerland, Sandoz Chemical.
Yeah, they are the ones who apparently sold LSD-25 to the CIA for the MK Ultra project. Yeah. And apparently they are also the ones who conducted the investigation in the town and said, oh yeah, no, it's totally ergot.
Yeah. I have heard that too, and
I don't know. I haven't seen anything to back that up.
I haven't either. I've seen that. I've seen that in numerous places, but it all seems to emanate from one source, which is Hank Albarelli.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of problems with this.
Yeah.
One,
just a couple?
Oh, well, there's a couple as in many.
Yeah.
So let's start with the fact that I have never actually heard of anybody successfully making LSD into an aerosol spray. But do you know what has to happen for LSD to affect you? You have to ingest it.
Yeah.
You can't get it on your skin, as far as I understand. And maybe crazy high dosages will do it. But from what I understand is that you have to ingest it. It can break down relatively quickly in the sunlight. So think about it. It's August. It's probably warm. It's probably sunny.
Yeah.
That's why there's always the stories of people who will have the blotter paper that they'll have out for a while sitting in the sunshine, and then they'll go to take their hits of acid and find out that it's no good anymore because it's broke down.
No, I store my acid in the fridge. That's the only place to keep it.
What's to say that they weren't aerosol canning it, that they were dosing his bread with it?
Okay,
people keep their bread out of the sun.
Okay, so I'm not going to say that has nothing to do with them directly treating the bread. I think that's assigning a higher level of conspiracy to the whole thing.
Okay.
Let's just say that they're flying over the town. They can't spray LSD. You have to ingest it. If it touches your skin, at least the research that I did, it doesn't do anything. It's not strong enough to penetrate.
Was this research sticking LSD on your skin and seeing what happened?
No, not
just
this time.
inhaling it through
No.
aerosol?
This drug is not one that I went ahead and tested.
That's too bad.
There's another one that we'll talk about, but this one, no.
Go ahead.
Well, there was some experimentation with the idea of using LSD as a weapon. The idea being that there are certain chemicals, as far as I know, I can't remember. There's one that it doesn't come to mind right now, but it facilitates the absorption of a drug through your skin.
Okay.
So you mix that up with the LSD, and then you drop like LSD bombs on the enemy. They explode and spray them down, and then all these enemy soldiers
Or tripping
they're
balls and don't want to fight.
And you don't have to shoot them at all. You just walk in there and just haul them off to the prison camp or wherever you're going to take them.
Here's a flower. He fell down. Here's a flower. He fell down.
Yeah.
Here's a worm. He fell down.
So it could be that some sort of experimentation with chemicals mixed with LSD that would actually cause everybody to get high. But my big problem with this as an experiment, whether they did the aerosol spraying or if they actually deliberately tainted the bread, if they tainted the flour that was made into the bread, the LSD would not survive the baking process.
Absolutely not.
No, it totally wouldn't.
It would have to be applied post the baking process.
So they unless the baker was actually conspiring with them.
Maybe they were putting it in the butter that he was giving out complimentary with his bread.
There you go. I like that idea.
That was the pats of butter.
Yeah. Here's your pat.
But actually, when you think about it, this could actually totally be a case of contaminated butter, and the baker totally got fingered for this unfairly.
Yeah.
Maybe it was contaminated butter.
See?
Do you eat bread without butter?
Sometimes, but it's usually like a sandwich.
Yeah,
and French
exactly.
aren't big into sandwiches.
But
And actually, the French put butter on their sandwiches usually, so...
Yeah, it could have been butter.
Could have been butter.
Yeah, it could have been some
Or
bad
oil and
cow. Yeah, the other thing I don't like about this is it was an experiment, supposedly. They had this whole research program called MK Ultra, and by the way, MK Ultra didn't actually begin or get funding until 1953. It might have been a precursor program, some sort of predecessor. But the thing about it is they did conduct a lot of experiments with drugging people and seeing what they could do in terms of brainwashing them or controlling them and stuff like that. It didn't really, in the end, work out. Eventually, they just dropped it because you just couldn't get reliable results. But if you're doing experiments like this, the way experiments work is you have to control things. If you just put it in the bread
and see what's happened,
and some guy has a slice and another guy pigs down half a loaf, well, you're not controlling the dosage at all. And also, how are you going to observe the results? Well, a bunch of guys show up in this village. Total strangers show up, and everybody's going nuts, by the way, and there's these guys with clipboards taking notes. Is that how it's supposed to work?
Well, maybe it's that they were the ones who came in and investigated, right? Or quote-unquote investigated, and so they're doing all these questioning, like, okay, well, how much did he have? Okay, so what were his symptoms? And that's a way to anecdotally collect evidence. Obviously, it's not good evidence data collection, but from what I understand about a lot of MK Ultra's alleged things, not the actual MK Ultra stuff, but the alleged MK Ultra stuff, they didn't really care. I mean, it wasn't like scientific. We've got the test group and we've got the control group, and we really care about it. It was kind of like, I don't know, let's see what happens.
I really don't think it would happen that way because
I don't think so either.
Because it's kind of useless information if you don't have a control group and you haven't controlled the dosages to see what each dosage is going to do. It's kind of useless.
Yeah.
Don't you think?
Although, in fairness, if you're testing it for something similar to let's just drop a bomb, you don't really care what exact dosage. You care about the overall effect on the group that's affected.
That's true,
right? Because if you're going to use it as a weapon, it's not okay. And each single person is going to get exactly this dose. It's like, how does it affect these 300 people that ingested it? Do they all go crazy? Do some of them go crazy? Maybe they tried to deploy it to 1,000 people and only those 300. And so that would be valuable data as well, because you wouldn't. It's not scientific the way that they're trying to deploy it. It's scientific. I mean, it's true to the science of them deploying it in this kind of hypothetical, we just dropped a bomb way.
But here's the other problem that I have with it is that France was a NATO ally. It would just seem more logical to go do this in a village in Mexico or something.
Someplace that actually didn't.
Yeah, I mean, that would make a lot more sense to me.
I agree.
Yeah. Or even a village, even a small town in the U.S. I mean, doing it in France, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
It just seems. It just seems strange or random that was the location chosen.
Yeah, God
Yeah.
knows why. I mean, maybe there's something about it. I don't know.
You done with that theory?
Yeah.
Well, I have a slightly different theory
Cool, let's
than
hear it.
LSD. So let's roll back here with a little bit of census data that I found. In 1947 in France, 20% of the population was essentially atheist, so 80% were religious. I couldn't really, in my quick digging, find the number that were Catholic. But let's just say, I'm just going to grab a number and say that 40% of the population is Catholic. Okay?
Okay.
40% of the town is Catholic. Well, this happened on the 15th of August. Do you know what happens on the 15th of August every year?
It's the 15th of August.
It's also observed is the Assumption of Mary. The Assumption of Mary is...
So you're thinking some bad communion wafer?
Well, what I think is going on, so the Assumption of Mary is, it's an observation based on the belief that Mary was actually assumed into heaven after she passed away rather than left in the ground like the rest of us plebes. And so what they do is they celebrate that, and there are feasts and there are meals and there are things like that. So we're going to say that we've got a Catholic portion of the population taking part in that. The other thing that I looked at was I started trying to find out what else has similar symptoms. And you know what has a very similar set of symptoms?
What's that?
Magic mushrooms.
Oh, yeah. Good
Magic
point.
mushrooms cause stomach cramps. They cause intestinal cramps. They cause some crazy hallucinations in people who get enough of them.
I'm not going to say how I know this, but I do know that
It does some terrible things to your innards.
Maybe if you OD'd, I know that if you OD'd, but I've actually, I'll admit it, I've done some shrooms.
What?
Yeah.
Anyway.
I never imagined, of course, maybe I didn't take enough. I never imagined I was being eaten by snakes or I had, red flowers sprouting out of my body.
Okay, so I have known people who have taken a lot at one time and were seriously fried. I mean, they were frying for a while, and they were having some of these same physical symptoms. And think about it, magic mushrooms, it's a poison. That's why your body does that, is it's trying to get rid of it.
So you're thinking that somebody accidentally picked the wrong mushrooms?
They picked the wrong mushroom for some dish, and the group gets together, and some people, just like you were talking about with the bread, where it's one guy gets one slice and the other guy wolfs down half a loaf. Well, this could be that somebody made this giant batch of some dish, and some people ate one, and it didn't feel good, but they were all right, and then a couple of people just wolfed it down and got massive amounts of a hallucinogenic mushroom, which would set them off. And it's not like mushrooms come on immediately. There is a build-up period before it starts to happen, and the peak is long, depending on how much somebody has taken. So I'm looking at this and thinking, I actually think that this is not ergot. I'm going to actually want to clear it, but I think that this is more of a magic mushroom scenario.
Yeah, maybe. Oh, were you going to say something?
I was just going to mention, if we're going the religious Catholic ceremony route, it's not unheard of for ergot to grow in wine.
It's true.
Oh, yeah, there's that.
Or,
beer.
wafers.
You were telling us earlier.
Beer.
It can be in beer.
Wafers.
So this is why you were talking about earlier, Joe, when you were saying maybe the baker is kind of getting a bad rap.
Yeah.
And I
Poor
agree
guy.
with that, because there's just so many other ways that it could have happened besides this one thing.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, because probably when people were sitting out and eating their